Thank you all for coming. I didn't expect to see that many people. That makes me even more excited. So before we start off, please, everyone on the back, feel free to come join me here on the front row, sitting on the floor. It'll be great. So look at the effects. Welcome to Advanced Angular Animations. My name is Elad Bezalel. I am part of the Angular Animations core team. I used to be on the material team as well. And I'm Angular and Web Technologies GDE. So today, I will try to rush because apparently I don't have the amount of time that I used to have. So we're going to bear with me because it's going to be really cool, really nice. We're going to go through all of the history of animations and how to do animations. All of you out there, you can join me here on the front. All right, so we're going to talk about CSS animations, JavaScript animations with green sock, and obviously Angular animations, and the future of Angular animations, so stay awake. I know food is coming. So before we go dive into animations, we should ask ourselves, why should we bother? So for me, animations, I define them as the glue between a good-looking UI and some really good user experience. For instance, you can take a look at this GIF here. When a user will click, when a user will click on an item, his eyes will follow the direction of the expansion. So that means it will keep him in the context of the application from where he went to where it go and back. So animations animations are really good because you can have the most beautiful application ever, but if you don't direct users to where you want them to look, they will go nuts. So use animations. So first of all, CSS animations, which are the easiest and fastest way to get into animations and to start using them today. It goes to two parts. We have CSS Transitions and we have keyframes that we'll talk in a bit. So CSS Transitions are the animating between visual changes between two element style states. We have a button which can be active, and we have background colors, and all we have to do is set a transition on the background for 300 milliseconds and the easing function, right? So this is all I have to do, and then when I have a button, if I will click it, it will go green. You see, I have a button, active, and hover. When I hover, it goes orange. When I click, it goes green. Simple, beautiful, working. And all I had to do, of course, is set this transition here, and the browser automatically do all the stuff for us. And let's talk about CSS keyframes. It's a way to reuse those visual changes, no matter the state of the component. So let's say I have a rotation animation that goes from 0 degrees to 360 degrees, and I have this loading indicator that keeps rotating forever until, let's say, the page is loaded. So here's the example of a loader that is being rotating and has an ease function, right? So this is all cool and all, and CSS animations can be really good. And you should use this CSS animation because it has some pros, which are it benefits cascading, that we'll see in a minute, which means that you can override animations by using just styles on CSS. It has a consistent API. You can just declare, I want animation on background or everything. It just behaves the same for everything. And it's really good for simple animations. Let's say I have this gallery, and I can just set transition 300 milliseconds for the picture. Once I hover, again, it scales. Once it's active, it scales again. And I have a transition here on the gallery item. And if you look here, I have a media query, which means that if the screen size will be at less than 600 pixels, I'm going to override the height of the gallery grid. Okay, it doesn't matter what's going on here. I just can override some stuff, and it will transition. Let's take a look. I have this gallery here. It's looking nice. And let's say I have, oops, let's say I'm changing the screen size. It scales nicely, right? So this is really good if you have a mobile application, you rotate the phone, then you want it to look nice and not ugly. But CSS animations are all good, but it's very, very, very difficult to sequence multiple animations. Let's say I'm animating one element, and I want to affect another element on the screen. It's really hard. It's really difficult to intercept these animations and change them along the way. And you can't use dynamic values. Also, keep in mind that when you do animations, there are only two properties that are GPU accelerated, which are opacity and transformations. Everything else, background, height, whatever, they will cause a reflow or repaint, which can affect the performance of our application, and you wouldn't understand why. So if you try to do some really cool animations, just keep in mind, you can only do transformations and opacity. Now let's talk about the second part, the JavaScript animation, which are more tricky and more complex to nail, but they are possible. Why should we do JavaScript? Because we have more control over our CSS animations. It is more intuitive than CSS animations because, again, we are animating elements. You can build complex choreographies with it. And this is where GreenSock comes in place. GreenSock is a cool framework that is alive, I think, for more than 10 years now. It was written originally for Flash, if you remember Flash, which is dead now. But because it was so good, the author of it decided he wanted to get the same API to JavaScript. And GreenSock is a complete rewrite of this great framework for doing animations in JavaScript in web. Why should we use GreenSock? It's called GSAP. Again, we have more control, it's more intuitive. We can animate everything, even, let's say I have JavaScript object or JSON, and I want to animate one value, which is, let's say, 1 to 0. It can animate it along the time. It is faster than CSS tree animations and transitions. I've watched some video that said they are running it on a separate thread, which means they can handle animations better. This is what they say. I believe them, and it also works great. You can build complex choreographies, and we'll take a look at it in a minute. It works with SVG, which is cool. It solves all the browser compatibility issues, so if you are aiming for multiple browsers, then it can help you. It is way more faster than jQuery, and it has almost 7 million websites that uses it. So cool. Let's take a look at a GreenSock example. It is their official example. You see I have a scrubber here. It's animating. I can reverse it, play, scale the timing, which can make it look slower or faster, right? So it's really cool. It's really nice. And let's see how it's been done. Let's say I want to have the same grid as before, the same gallery as before, but this time when I click about one image, it will expand and give me some title and description of, I don't know, it was fruits and vegetables. So I click one of them and it will show me some descriptions. Let's see how we can do it, because in CSS it's almost impossible. It is impossible. So I get the element here, and I get the element here, and I get some callback for onComplete. From this element, I can query. This is a helper function that I've built. I can query for my HTML elements. This is the content element, picture, title. But this is the interesting part. I'm using Timeline Lite, which comes directly from GreenSock. It's they are built of how you can do like complex animations along a timeline. This is their concept. You have a timeline of animations. And light is because it's a light version of it. So first of all, I can set some stylings that I want to set for these elements. Let's say I want the picture to be smaller or something like that. It doesn't really matter. And then I had something really cool, which called a label. And this means that I can mark some points in time that and it makes sense. I can mark some points in time on the timeline, and when those points will hit, some other stuff will be affected. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that I am changing again the stylings of the content per se, which is taking 500 milliseconds, but I want it to affect only when it starts, right? And I can add as many labels as I want along the way, and then I can actually sequence multiple animations and affect multiple elements along the time. And then on the end, I can just call a callback. Let's say I wanted to show an alert or do some other animations when I'm done. So let's see how it goes. I have apples, bananas, tomatoes, right? These are tomatoes. It was funny. It was funny to me. Never mind. So yeah, it was a it was a mistype, and then I realized, and then I said, this is funny. So why shouldn't you use GSAP? Because it is not as popular as CSS3. So it might get some buggy, and it's not well. I mean, it's only one group of people who write it, and not the entire web as we know it. It costs money. I know, this sucks. It's open source, but it's not MIT. And they say they do it only because they have to somehow live. So if you want to use it, you have to pay for commercial if you're doing some real apps, and you have less learning resources for it. So the general out of all this section is you should combine JavaScript and CSS. I'm going to show you an example of an animation that I recently built for my company. Don't judge me, it was written in React, but the concept stays the same. Okay, so this is a family size picker, okay? We wanted to somehow have the user select the size of their family, and because our application is only web and is directed to mobile, we wanted to make it super performant, and we wanted it to look great. All these numbers that are floating here are essentially some family member icons, but just for the example here, I don't have it. So I can touch and slide these dialer here. I can use my keyboard, and you can see that once I change the number, the floating heads will just spread themselves again in the space that they have. And this is taking in computing the size of the screen and the available space for the floating heads to have. So it is really complicated. I have some really complicated JavaScript behind it that calculates everything, but then I change only the transformation of the floating heads per se. This is a floating head, if I'm not clear, a floating number. I change only the location of the floating number, and then because I have a transition on top of it, it will just move there automatically, and I don't have to do anything. And the same thing for here. You see the opacity changes, so it's and the transformation of rotation changes. So this is really, really well performing on mobile. So this is cool. So you should use JavaScript and CSS. But obviously today we are here talking about Angular. So Angular animation is the best of all solutions, right? Why Angular can't work really good with GreenSock is because it manipulates, GreenSock manipulates the DOM directly. And Angular doesn't like it. You don't know when anything changed because it's outside of the zone. It is not Angular native, and it is not aware of the router and other transitions. And most important of all, it's not aware of any insertion and deletions of any elements from the screen. So it's really hard to do it. Why should you use Angular Animations? Again, it has more control than CSS Animations. It used the CSS transformation and keyframes, so it's like the combination. And we have the animations DSL, which is really cool, and we're going to talk about. And then you can build complex choreographies. It works with SVG, solve browser compatibility, and as I said, it works with enter and leave of elements. So let's talk about simple animations. So we have style binding, style animations. We can bind here. Let's say if I have a slide for it. Yeah, we can bind here. We can say I want, okay, the slides are a bit off, but let's say I have an open close container, okay, and once I click it, it will open or close. Make sense? It will show the state, open or close, and the cool thing is that I can just bind into style background, and if it's true, I will show yellow. If it's not, if it's false, I will show red. Simple. And then all I have is a transition on the background. That's it in the class. And contrary, we have class animations. I can hook into a class, and then once the expression is true or false, it will put that class on this element. The same thing as before. We have is open, and then once the opened class, same thing from here, is being applied, we change it to yellow, and we still have the transition. So let's see an example. It's really small, but believe me, when I click, it will change. And these are both examples, so it's really simple, okay? But let's talk about more complex animations with the DSL. The DSL is combined with three parts. We have the triggers, which is in charge of announcing that the animation is being invoked. And the way to use it, you just declare the trigger inside the animation part in the component. And then I need to bind it with the at marking to some value expression to say, is it active or not? I have some state for the trigger, so that means I can declare many states, let's say open, closed, and then I can set the styles for these states. Sorry. And then we have the transitions between those two states. I declare open, when I go from open to closed, animate for 500 milliseconds. This is it. It's really simple. So let's talk about a simple open-close animation. And I say simple because we are doing something very complex here, and we'll get to it. So again, we say we have two states. It's either open or closed. I set some styles, I set some transitions from open to close, from close to open. And then there's this something here, which is the asterisk for the height. This thing is a super complex issue with JavaScript animation, that you have to compute the final height of the element. But how would you know the final height of the element if you never did the change? So the Angular animation writer, Matthias, he solved it internally, because you can do it, but it's really hard to do it for every element. And all you have to do in order to change the height to what it should be is just use asterisk. And we can just see the example here. I have a box, it's closed. Once I click it, we have more content that is being added. But once I click again, it shrinks itself to the right height that it should be. Right? And this is really cool and nice to use. So you don't have to think of it yourself. And then we have another part which is really hard. How would I know when an element is being added to my DOM? How would I know when it's leaving? So again, Angular is solving it for us, because Angular is in charge of these changes. We have ng-for, ng-if. We know when these changes are being applied. So if I have an ng-if with an expression and an animation, I can just say, when you're void, when there's nothing, this is your style. And when you're going to any other state, take whatever height, whatever opacity you should take. And then we can just set transition from whatever state to whatever state, and it will animate, right? Okay, and there's another way to do it, because if you'll take a look here, we have an expression which is saying, which state are you? But why do I need it? I mean, I only want to animate enter and leave. So I can just put my animation here, and then this is a cool syntax on top of this void stuff that you've seen that says, when there's a transition for entering, do some styling and do some transitions. So this is really nice. Let's see. Okay. In the end, I will show how everything is being joined together. So we have choreographing, which is something that we've talked in earlier, that in CSS is really hard. In JavaScript it's cool. Let's see how we do it in Angular. Let's say I have this trigger, my multi-element animation, and then internally I can just query for some elements and animate them. And I can even stagger them. Stagger means that I'm applying the animation in a time sequence. That means I will apply the animation one after another with some delay. So I can query for some elements internally and just animate them one after another. And this is all available for us just in Angular. So let's see an example here. And okay, once I click toggle on, you'll see a list of items entering, and once I toggle off, they are leaving, and they are all animated. And this is really nice. All I had to do was query for elements. So you should use it. Last part is routing animations. So GreenSock and JavaScript in general, they don't know what routing means. And Angular, because we are using states of the animation, because we have open and close, we said we have, let's say, an open and close component, and it has two states, open and close. What if our router has some states, and the states are our routes? So this is how we do it. I have the router, I wrap it with a div and give it an animation. The prepare route state is a helper function that gives us, that takes the router outlet and then return the current state, the current route. And then I can pass some data in my routes to say which animation am I, or which animation should run. And then all I have to do is just declare this router animation, set some transitions from home to profile, let's say, set some querying. I want for every element to enter, I want it to let's say I want to make slide animation, right? I want to both of my pages to slide in and slide out. So once the new page is being inserted, I want to make it invisible of the screen, so I move it out. I animate the leave of the old page, which I animate again out of the page to the other side, and then again I will move the new page in. It doesn't matter like what animation I'm doing, just like you can do whatever you want with it. And you can see I have this animate child here. Animate child calls the children animations and tell them, hey, if there's any animation, run. So I can have a routing animation and then run internal animations that we'll just see. So you saw when I enter the page, like they're fading in, okay? And once I click one of these images, they will fade out and then another one fade in. So this is all routing animations, okay? And I have some animations inside that they will leave when I route again. So this is really cool. This is how you can do it. And now let's talk about the future of Angular animations. Me and Matthias hope that it will land anytime soon. I can't say times, I promised him. So the future of Angular animations, they say, why should we even declare any transitions? We want just to animate some simple stuff. We want a pipe. So let me show you an internal code that I have. I made Matthias. How do I zoom in? Wait. Okay, is it clear? Bigger. I'm doing that. Now it's good? Okay, let me close. Okay, so let's say we have this class. Again, we want to animate it. I can just pass it to an animation pipe, give it some animation string, and then it will just animate. Because we don't need to declare for each one of these classes, each one of these styles, we don't need to declare another animation. It's wasteful. So I can just say, I want this class to happen, and once it's active, I want to animate it. So let's take a look at the example. So this is an example of what we did here. Each one of those, when I click update everything, it will run a random animation, and it will run on random items. So I can combine those animations, and I can even give it some random properties to animate. So this is really cool. And another part is that we can even pass it some functions that determine some box easing. So we can have, like, I can toggle this open and close from before, but I can even make it slower, right? You can see it slower, or even faster. And again, toggle background fast or slow. So stay tuned for the changes that supposed to come anytime soon. I hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you very much.